Mr. J. Christopher, protect the righteous with wisdom and strength.
Hey guys, here I am again, J. Christopher Hamilton, the Industry Esquire, and here to show you the basics of a pilot script deal. So welcome to my bootcamp on making a pilot script deal. Now, whether you're a producer hiring a writer being hired by a producer, or you're someone in either of the two roles discussing the type of deal with your professional, this training will help you make the right deal, give you the competitive advantage you need, okay? So hang on to your seat. We're gonna jump into how to make a pilot script deal without an attorney by your side, all right? All right, so let's get started. But before we begin, I think I should tell you a little bit about my background. I should be qualified to discuss this topic, wouldn't you say? I spent about 20 years in the business working for major conglomerates and studios. Viacom, Disney, Lionsgate, Warner Media. I work with brands like ABC, VH1, MTV, Nickelodeon, celebrities like Alicia Keys, Jennifer Garner, a host of folks, Kevin Hart, a host of companies, a host of actors, producers, writers. But one of the things that I've learned after spending a lot of time with writers is a number of those guys and gals can't afford to pay for an attorney, right? They're just starting out, they don't have the resources to negotiate their deal, or they can't get access to good representation. So I made this training program for folks like that to give them the inside strategies, the inside information, so that they can negotiate a fair deal if they don't have access to an experienced attorney on your side. I want you to understand how pilot script deals are typically structured so that you're compensated and protected according to traditional industry standards. This training will be focused on the primary deal terms, such as script fees, producing fees, back-end participation, credits, and the rights you should be compensated for, okay? Those are the key things we're going to cover in this conversation. So, I'm going to give you guys some context on how the literary world works when it comes to writers, right? There's a national labor union known as the Writers Guild of America, often called the WGA. They have an office based in New York. They have another office based in LA, but they govern the terms by which their members are employed by producers, networks, and studios. However, the WGA does not govern deals with production companies that are not, and I repeat, that are not signed up as signatories to their guild or productions outside of their jurisdiction. If you are a non-guild writer or you are a non-guild producer, the WGA guild restrictions, minimums, guarantees will not impact the deal you're making. But if you're a writer, it's good to use them as a frame of reference because at least you'll know what the bare minimum you'd be entitled to if you were a member, okay? So hopefully that gives you some context. But now we're going to talk about some of the customary deal terms in pilot script deals. What I'm going to do is prime you on the basics, okay? Now, there are three types of pilot script deals in terms of structure. The first two are called if-come deal and a blind script deal. And then the last is pretty much the standard. But what you want to keep in mind is this. These structures are really irrelevant from the point of view of compensation. They really relate more to your stature. Let me give you an example. For example, a studio will do a blind script deal with you or an if-come script deal under two conditions. Now, the blind script deal is called blind. It's called the blind script deal because the studio is blind to what you're going to write. Who makes a deal like that? Why would someone commit payment for something that they don't know what it'll be? Well, because of the stature of the writer. They want to be in business with that writer, so they'll commit to making a payment for the script without knowing the idea because they'll work with him to get the right idea. And this is a way that they can get in business with the writer early on. Because obviously, not a lot of companies can guarantee money for something without knowing the result of something, right? The second is an if-come script deal. That's like the other end of the spectrum where the producer's saying, well, look, I don't want to lay out money for a script that I can't guarantee I'm going to get reimbursed for by a network. So it's called if-come, meaning if I get a network to buy your script and reimburse me, then comes the terms to produce it and the fees for your services. Okay, so again, if-come script deal, blind script deal. Blind script deal for the big guy, if come for maybe the less experienced guy. All right, so now we can start talking about the standard script deal. And by the way, both of those deals, although they have these unique names, they have the same deal terms in terms of fees, compensation back end. It's just the means by which the process begins is a little different based on, again, the circumstances by which the producer is looking to engage a writer. All right, so now let's get into the basics of the actual deal. Some of the standard terms. Again, compensation, credit, fees, back end. Let's talk about how those things get laid out, right? But before we do that, keep in mind this. If you want to know more information about how the fees are structured and what the minimums are, consult the WGA, consult the Guild's website, and they will tell you, and you can learn all about the right way and the wrong way to be paid according to your services for writing a script. Another thing to keep in mind is this, underlying rights. The underlying rights to your project will impact the fees, rights, and even ownership you have in your project. For example, if you're writing a script based on a book, a movie, an article, someone's life story, that's called source material. And that, again, is going to impact the nature and the terms by which you're going to be paid for this script. So everything we're going to cover right now, I will say that you have to be prepared to modify that if you are not writing an original project. Keep that in mind, okay? If it's not an original idea written by you, meaning out of your head, not someone else's book or idea or article, then this is going to be an area where you want to keep in mind it's going to change based on what we're going to discuss. What are the script fees, right? Well, the WGA script fees for a half-hour primetime network show is about $27,000, right? $27,000. That's the minimum they're going to pay for a half-hour network TV show. And if it's a 1-hour TV show, you're going to get about $40,000. And then if it happens to be a movie of the week, like a long-form film, but on TV, then you're going to get about $60,000 again if it's pursuant to Guild minimums. All right, but bear in mind a couple of things. The rates we're discussing right now for network primetime programming doesn't apply to cable, doesn't apply to certain digital productions. So, and then these fees will change year after year. They go up in price, meaning their rates go up. So if you want the details of those rates and the details by which writers are engaged pursuant to Guild terms, consult the WGA, consult their website. All right, but nonetheless, at the very least, you're going to walk away understanding how the framework of the deal operates and what you need to negotiate for. Also bear in mind, the fees for those scripts are based on a combined teleplay and story. They're not for treatments and concepts. They're not for outlines. They're not for materials you submit in preparation for your script. No. The complete script, the teleplay and the story, earns you the full script fee. Again, consult the Guild if you want to know more information and get more details about rates and terms outside of Primetime Network or in Primetime Network. But again, this presentation, this training is based on the Primetime Network customary standards and fees and not cable television. And when I say Primetime Network, guys, what I mean is ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. That would be considered, quote unquote, a Primetime Network platform. Here's the thing, guys, keep this in mind, okay? What I just described to you was what the Guild minimums are for those script fees, like the half hour and the 1 hour. But the network usually pays even more than that. They won't pay the bare minimum. For a junior writer, they'll probably give you about $50,000, right? And then for an experienced writer, that person can earn up to $250,000 or even more for their script. So again, just giving you a sense of what the Guild requires and then what is the typical standard. Let's talk about producing fees. Now, producing fees, they're never governed by the Guild. Producing fees are not governed by the Guild, all right? But they're relevant because you, as a writer of a network TV show, you don't just get a script fee, but you should also be getting producing fees. Now, these producing fees can range, a pretty large range actually, depending upon your level of experience. But for a pilot producing fee, for someone who's inexperienced and just starting out, you're looking at somewhere like between $50,000 and $20,000, right? And again, for like an experienced producer, you can earn upwards of $100,000 for your pilot producing fee. Now, if you're a big name, you can even get more than that. But allow me to clarify something here. Just because you're getting a producing fee as a writer does not mean you're physically producing the show, okay? So the studio is handling that part of the job. Your job is just to make sure the material you wrote gets produced as you envisioned, right? So you're going to be involved in maybe reworking parts of the script during that pilot development phase. You're going to be involved in talking to the director to make sure, again, the vision you relayed in print is going to be conveyed in the moving image, okay? So again, a lot of you probably already knew that, but I wanted to make sure that was clear for those watching this who have like little to no experience in this space. So keep in mind that, like I said, guys, the series fees are going to be less than the pilot fees. So for example, you know, the discount could be anywhere between 25 to 30%, right? So you'll end up, if we're talking about the fees we just discussed, 15 and 100 grand, we're talking about maybe 10,000 for the series producing fee and 70,000 per episode for the series producing fee if it's an experienced writer. So again, 25 to 30% is going to be what you're going to get less on the series producing fees based on the fact that all the work goes into producing it in the pilot phase. Also, keep in mind, you know, there's a lot of the factors that are going to affect your fees, like your stature in the business, the level of production, what size of budget it is. But to avoid getting lowballed, know what others were paid by the same studio or network. Get that information, because that'll help you make a more effective deal if you know what someone else got paid for the same work. And this is where representation comes in. Access to information is key. It's all about who you know, right? Okay. By the way, something else to bear in mind is this. If you are a WGA writer, often the studios will be able to offset some of your weekly writing fees against your series producing fees, right? So meaning this, you will not be paid for the writing fees on top of your producing fees. Again, this only applies to WGA members on WGA shows. This is considered, and this happens when you're considered to be an Article 14 writer, a producer-writer hybrid. We're not going to get into the complexities of that because, you know, it's not for what this production and this training is about, but I would recommend, if you want to know more about that, consult an experienced attorney or the WGA to get more detail. Now, let's discuss bonuses and royalties. Now, these are not mandated by the Guild, but in the case of a series royalty, they are often used to offset Guild-mandated residuals you may be owed. Again, we're talking Guild terms, Guild parameters, Guild productions, not for folks who are not members. Nonetheless, wherever you're making a deal, if you're not a WGA member, you should still be asking for series royalties and bonuses. Okay, let's get into some of the detail. If you're a writer that has successfully sold a pilot script, which then got produced into a series, even if the pilot was never made, you should expect to receive what is called a series production bonus. This is your reward for writing a TV show that actually gets produced into a series. Again, you should ask for a series production bonus because you worked hard, the pilot was produced, and now the series is going to get produced, and you need to be rewarded for that. The network level, this is usually about $25,000, all right? The other payment that is customary to receive if your series gets produced is an episodic royalty payment, also known as series royalties. These are passive payments you get for each episode of the series that gets produced and distributed. They usually can range anywhere between $1,500 on the low end to $10,000 on the high end. But again, we're talking about the network TV level. And you're paid them without having to do any work. Really sweet deal. Passive payments are the best way to get paid in this business for work you did previously. Now let's get into what's called contingent compensation. Okay, so what's contingent compensation? What does that mean? Do you as a creator, are you entitled to it really? The answer is yes. Contingent compensation is important because in addition to upfront money you get for the script and for your producing fee services, you're also going to be entitled to fees what's on the back end. But these are contingent fees. That's what's called contingent comp. You only get the compensation if the project makes a certain amount of revenue. The idea here is that the network or studio is going to produce it, generate all this money, but then use the money to offset the cost of producing it, and the leftover is what you and others will be entitled to on the back end of the project. Now, you should be entitled to a piece of this revenue, but the studio or network is going to take some of their own money off the top. This is what they're going to do is they're going to take a percentage of the distribution fees and the overhead fees. And the truth of it is that they take it out even before you see your check, okay? The overhead fee can range usually about 10 to 15%, but I'd say don't accept anything more than 10% overhead fee coming out of your back end. And then they'll get a distribution fee, which is usually about 15 and 20%, but I'd say don't accept anything more than a 15% distribution fee coming out of the revenue that they owe you for back end. All right, I'll repeat, 10% overhead for the studio network and 15% distribution fee. That's all you want to get. If you can negotiate better than that, by all means, let me know you were able to do it. It's a real fight oftentimes. And bear in mind that this area of the deal is the most complex area. So there's so many numerous financial mechanisms that are built into these payouts. It's best that you consult an experienced professional who's done these deals if you're going to be protected in this part of the contract. Now, let's talk about credits. What credits are you entitled to? What's the impact of credits on the deal? Well, here's the thing. If you're the sole writer, meaning this, you wrote both the teleplay and the story. Again, there was no additional writer that came to create those elements, right? You were the guy or girl, you were the man or woman, you were the person that wrote both of these pieces of material, then you'd be entitled to what's called a created by credit. Now, the created by credit is the most highly coveted credit on the series, so you've got to make sure you're the sole writer on those materials to make sure you get that credit. And the guild determines who gets created by it, so that's another thing. If this is a WGA production you're working on, another thing that you don't have to worry about, the guild is going to protect you in that regard. If there's not a WGA governed project, then ask for whatever credit you want. There is no limitation. But let's give you some context on how this breaks down from a technical point of view in terms of this created by credit. So if you're receiving story by credit, meaning you originated the distinct idea and then created the narrative elements of the story, and then you got teleplay by credit, meaning this, you wrote the dialogue for the script, right? Then you will earn what's considered to be written by credit. Again, all guild mandated, all guild covered. And if you get written by on that pilot, you have secured your created by credit. All right. So again, hopefully you guys will be careful as to how and who you write with so that you can make sure that you earn your requisite credit, especially those created by credits on the shows you create. Now let's talk about producing credits, right? These are not governed by the guild. They have no jurisdiction over producing credits. So in this area, the guild rules don't really apply or aren't going to be helpful. But there is a thing called industry custom and standards, right? So usually if you created the show, you will be entitled to an executive producer credit on the show. Now, for a junior writer, it's a lot harder to get, okay? So you may end up with a lesser credit if you're a junior writer. So you may end up with something like a co-executive producer credit or a supervising producer credit. But I think it's worth fighting for, even if you have no experience. If you created the show and a major network wants to produce your show, then you need to fight for that EP credit because you deserve it. At least from my point of view, you do. Now, another thing to keep in mind is this. All right, it's not always about just the credits you get. It's about how you get them, right? How you get those credits. For example, how long is your credit on screen? Is it on a separate card? The idea here is this. You want to ask for your credits on a separate card, meaning no one else's credit appears next to yours. It's not part of that credit crunch or that roll at the end of the movie or the TV series, I mean. And, you know, if someone else is getting a credit in your production, their font size and the duration of their credit on screen isn't going to be more favorable than what you're receiving. So what you want to do is protect yourself by making sure that there's no other producer on the show that gets credit placement better than you. okay? The term you want to ask for, the technical term is MFN, Most Favored Nations with respect to your credit provision. So let's talk about what it means to be locked to a show, right? What does that mean, locked to a show, attached to a show? Basically, the idea is this. You produce a successful show for the network, and you will expect to be attached to that show and continue to write for it and produce episodes for the network for as long as possible. So what you want to ask for and negotiate is being locked for life. Now, here's the truth of it. If you don't have a lot of clout or you're not as an experienced writer, then there's a likelihood that you won't get that provision in your deal. And you know what? It's okay, because there's a fallback position. And by the way, the whole idea here is to make sure that if the network for some reason wants to kick you off your own show, not likely, but it happens, then you'd be attached even just on paper, and you get paid regardless of you no longer being on the show, working on the show. That's the benefit of being locked for life. But again, your fallback position is you're going to say, look, okay, you can't lock me for life. I don't have the stature, I don't have the clout, I don't have the muscle. Then at the very least, lock me for the first 2 or 3 seasons of the show. And the truth of it is this, that's very doable and that's very customary. And then what you can also negotiate for is this. If it turns out that, your 2 or 3 seasons, you've done your 2 or 3 seasons and you still want to be involved, then they should be paying you 25% of your fee for the remainder of the series as a consultant, because you want to go on and do other things. So again, I'll recap for you. You start out by saying, lock me for life. They say, no, we can't do that. Then you say, well, lock me for 2 to 3 years or 2 or 3 seasons, and then attach me as a consultant at 25% of my fee for the remainder of the life of the series. You deserve it. You've worked hard to create that successful franchise, and you should not be left out of the financial win just because you're going to go on and create another show for someone else, okay? So push back on being attached to the show in successive seasons, even if you've already completed 2 years or 2 seasons and you got to do something else, all right? So now let's talk a little bit about derivatives, right? What's a derivative? How does that work? We're not talking about financial models on Wall Street. We're talking about derivative productions. What does it mean to have a derivative production? That means that, again, you created a successful series for the network, and now all of a sudden they're going to make a remake or a spin-off of the show, right? Just think of Game of Thrones. They've been talking about doing another spin-off of Game of Thrones. If you created Game of Thrones and they want to do the prequel to Game of Thrones, or they want to do a spin-off with a character, then you should be attached to that spin-off, meaning you should be attached to those derivatives, right? And what kind of deal should you get? Well, look, you created a successful series. No reason you should get less than what you got on the first show. So what you want to negotiate for is, at the very least, a deal that is commensurate with the deal you got on the very first show, okay? And then if you have leverage, negotiate for a better deal than that. But again, if you don't have leverage and they don't want to get into all of that with you, then you say to them, look, attach me to all derivatives, whether it's a sequel, whether it's a remake, whether it's a prequel, whether it's a movie, right? Guarantee that I'll get no less than the money I made on the initial show, and then we'll negotiate the rest in good faith. That's your fallback position. So one thing I want you guys to keep in mind is this. We talked a lot about, how to negotiate and getting the best deal, but one thing you got to keep in mind at all times is this show belongs to the network, okay? They paid you a script fee, they own it, so they will control all of the rights and they will control all of the creative. But in your deal, what you could negotiate for is create a meaningful creative consultation rights, which means this. They can't all of a sudden, add a character or do things without consulting with you on those key elements. You can also ask for key business consultation, right? So you can keep track of what kind of money is being spent on the show, how is it being marketed. These are all additional things you can negotiate to protect yourself and get you the best deal possible. Listen, I hope you guys, enjoyed this training. I hope you gained some knowledge, some insight about how to make the best pilot script deal. And I hope you guys found the information really, really helpful. I'm going to be doing more of these trainings. And so just keep tuning in, keep joining the Brooklyn Boardroom and find out more about how to make a competitive deal and gain all the inside information that I've gained over the years to give you the competitive edge. If you want to reach out to me to talk more about any deals that are percolating in your world, or if you just have general questions about how to deal make, hit me up anytime. Industry Esquire. You can find me at BK Boardroom on Instagram. That's the letters BK Boardroom. You can also find me on YouTube by typing in the search Brooklyn Boardroom. You can find me on. You can go to Patreon and find me. I mean, there's lots of ways to get at me. And if you want to get at me directly, just email me at brooklynboardroom@gmail.com. brooklynboardroom@gmail.com, and I'll help you. I'll do what I can to help you make the best deal possible.
Mr. J. Christopher, protect the righteous with wisdom and strength.